Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. In this episode, we're going to look at Officer James's narrative. Officer James's narrative really stands out from many of the other officers. Although he wasn't the first responding officer, he was on the scene on the Monday, and he was also present for the arrest of Chris Watts. He was actually the officer who put Chris Watts into sort of shackles and chaperoned him to the cruiser and drove him to the prison, or to jail. And so it's not just that, it is just the fact that Officer James is quite consistent in terms of his participation in the investigation. As you're about to see, although he arrives late, I think because of the relative lateness of his arrival, he's still got quite a lot of his shift to get through, which is why he participates in quite a fundamental way in the sort of fabric of the Watts story. He calls many of Shanann's friends, and he's one of the people who's instrumental in getting a lot of the backstory. He doesn't speak as much to Chris Watts as he does to other people, kind of after they sort of decamp or sort of disembark from the Watts home, and then he sort of starts an investigation kind of on his own, or independently, in terms of calling various people. But let's go through the through his narrative, and it's on Discovery page 55. And I'm not sure if we'll be able to go through all of it because it is quite a long narrative. As you can see, it goes on for quite a few pages, up till page 60. And these are some of his notes. You can see he's made notes of quite a few of Shanann's friends. I just want to highlight this, it's just caught my eye here, that the girls are light sleepers. And I will refer to that, I will refer back to that particular note that is taken in his narrative. And you might think it's unimportant, but you'll see that it is actually quite important. So we go to Discovery page 55. And besides these items that were sort of seized, clothes in the master bedroom, bedding and so on, it's quite a lot of items. Light blue nitrile glove, only one of them. The Hold Me Tight book that Shanann got. The leggings, possibly the clothing last seen in. These are the only items that are registered as this, clothes possibly last seen in. I'm not sure if he says the same thing about her shoes. But the shirt that she was last seen in arriving isn't described in that way. Anyway, Officer James, and the narrative starts at approximately 19 minutes past 4. He arrived on scene to the 2800 block of Saratoga Trail at the request of Officer Coonrod. So he arrived after Detective Bomhover arrived. So that definitely is quite late. Upon arrival, Coonrod briefed James on just the information that Shanann Watts and her two daughters Bella and Celeste were missing. Officer Coonrod pointed out the residence to me, which is, he describes as a yellow 2-story with brown trim. It's not quite how I would describe it. It seems like light, sort of a brown and a darker brown. Anyway, he says, when I arrived on scene, the left garage door was open and I observed a white Lexus SUV inside. So that is the scene as he found it. I later observed a male, later identified as Chris Watts, exit the residence. There was also a brown extended cab. Well, there you have the color of the vehicle. a Ford pickup parked in the street in front of the house. I spoke to Detective Baumhover over the phone, and he advised Sergeant Bakes was on his way over and to check the house further for the 3 missing parties or for any note that may have been left behind. And so now you have Coonrod on scene, Detective Baumhover on scene, Officer James on scene, and now Sergeant Bakes. That would be 4 of them. So that's 4 officers on the Monday, right? Then, so what they're looking for is a note that may have been left behind. And the closest thing to a note is Chris Watts saying that Shanann had left her ring by a bedside table as if to say, I'm done with this marriage. I'm leaving this marriage behind, right? But no note, no Facebook update, no phone call. In fact, she left her phone, her car, her purse, her medication, everything behind, including, looks like her clothing, and her suitcase, and her toiletries, and her, as I said, the medication. All she took was her children. That is what it looked like at the time. Officer James says, I spoke to Chris and he advised he was fine with us going through his house. So once again, he's being asked permission if they can go through the house, but each officer needs permission. Chris said he was going to go walk around the neighborhood to clear his head. I think that's quite interesting. To clear his head, not to search for anybody. It's possible that he may have wanted to call Kessinger at this time because that is the time she would have arrived home. So he may have wanted just a little bit of a breather so he can contact her and say, hey, how are you going? And kind of make it seem as though everything's normal with him. Chris advised he works for Anadarko as an operator. He advised he works Monday to Friday. I completed a consent search form for the house. Christopher advised he is the homeowner. That's also quite important. That is also quite important. Chris Watts is the homeowner, not Shanann. And so if they had gotten divorced, even though he was the homeowner, he would have lost, I guess, the proceeds of the home, at least half of them. If she disappeared, he would kind of remain the homeowner, if that makes sense. And he would gain by that, from that. I advised Chris I wanted to search his house in its entirety for missing persons. That's kind of an interesting thing just because, you know, Coonrod had already done that. Nicole Atkinson had already done that. Nicholas had already done that. So it's not as though they were hiding somewhere in the house. So they weren't really searching for missing persons. They were searching for clues. I then had Chris read the bottom of the consent to search form and advised him to ask me any questions he may have before signing. Chris read the bottom and waived his right to a warrant. He then signed and dated the form. A few moments later, Sergeant Bakes, Officer Coonrod, and I searched the house. Now, you've got to bear in mind, at this point, either the bed sheets are in the trash can, or if they're not in the trash can, they are somewhere else in the house. And then the question is, did 4 officers overlook the bedding in the trash can? Another possibility is that the bedding was somewhere else. It could have been in one of the containers in the basement. Who knows? It could have been inside the laundry. I think that is a distinct possibility. That at that time, the bedding was actually in the sort of washing machine. And that is always a important thing to check at a crime scene. Besides bleach containers, what is the situation inside the washing machine or in the laundry basket? That applies to the Scott Peterson case. It actually also applies to the Amanda Knox case, where the murder victim's clothing was found inside the washing machine along with Amanda Knox's. And according to some stories around it, when the police arrived, the washing machine light was still on, meaning it had just done a cycle. And you might think not much about that, but Amanda Knox was sort of well known amongst her roommates for not really doing washing. They kind of kept having to ask her. And so the question is, did the girl who was murdered do the washing? But the thing is, she had to have been dead for more than 10 or 11 hours at that point. So would the machine still be warm and having just done a cycle? Well, who else could have done the washing? Anyway, I will touch on Amanda Knox probably on the 1st of November, on the anniversary of Meredith Kercher's death. I will do that. I think it was actually the day after, the 2nd of November. But I will just do a brief recap of that. So for those interested, if you haven't subscribed, you should do so. And then if you want to watch that particular recap, I've also done a debunk of Malcolm Gladwell's story about Amanda Knox in his book. That's a playlist on this channel, so you can check that out. Anyway, coming back to this, as I said, I think a possibility for where those pillow sheets and so on might have been in the laundry, in the washing machine. So the next thing, a few moments later, Sergeant Bakes, Officer Coonrod, and I searched the house. So now you have 3 officers searching the house at the same time. And I believe at this time, I think Chris Watts was standing in the kitchen with the Detective Bormover on his right and Nicole Atkinson on his left. And he sort of had his arms folded and he was swaying left to right. And the detective was sort of looking towards the refrigerator. And at one point, Nicole Atkinson says something and Chris Watts gives her like a "if looks could kill" look. That's kind of quite well known in terms of that. But I think that is when these 3 officers were going through the house. Chris advised we had free reign and to do whatever you got to do. Chris was advised he can go inside with us or stay outside. Chris advised he would stay outside on the deck. Chris advised that they had been together. He'd been married to Shanann for 6 years that year and 8 years in total. And at the time of the crime, they were just celebrating their 8-year anniversary. So it was actually the 10th of August. It was kind of a milestone that I think it was their dating anniversary or something like that. Anyway, to come back to this, he said that he would stay outside and it was very unusual behavior, what had happened, that Shanann had just left. It's more like, I think he was saying it was unusual behavior based on what everyone else knew. But, I think the fact that he didn't call 911 just shows that he wasn't going to put up his hand and say it was unusual behavior. I mean, what was very unusual behavior was him committing murder. And he was obviously trying to act as though everything was fairly normal and nothing to be too concerned about. Chris entered the house and put their dog in the backyard. Upon approaching the front door, observed a Ring doorbell camera. That's quite interesting and astute from the officer. Chris advised me he usually uses the garage door, and it depends what Shanann usually uses. It depends, I guess. Now, this is where I want to refer you back to the notes where it is said that the girls were light sleepers. Because the girls were light sleepers, Chris Watts usually didn't use the garage door. Let me just say that again. Because the girls were light sleepers and everybody knew this, Shanann knew it, Chris Watts knew it, Christina Meacham had lived with the family for I think a month or 2 when Shanann had her neck surgery. She knew it. Shanann's parents knew it, that there was like this important thing not to wake the children because that would then cause a disruption in schedules and just add to a lot of extra work. And so because of that, Chris Watts didn't park his car on the driveway, and also he didn't use the garage door because of the noise it made, and the garage door was right beneath the windows, the bedroom windows of the children. And so the whole idea that he would go out that day through the garage door just didn't really make sense. But bear in mind, he'd been doing that for the entire month of July while Shanann and the kids were away. So when he says he usually uses the garage door while he was having his affair, but not when the whole family were usually together, as they were supposed to be that Monday night and Monday morning. He says he advised the only alerts he had for the doorbell were when her friends were here. Chris advised the ring should record as you approach the front door. I quite like that, where he says the ring should record as you approach the front door. Of course, it didn't record as Watts walked back and forth on the driveway on the morning in question, because he turned it off. Chris said it showed that she got home at 1:48 a.m. So he knows exactly the time. He knows exactly the time and is right, because he more than likely watched Shanann as she arrived home. He watched and waited for her. He said the only thing that was weird was the garage door showed it was still open after he left. Now, I'm not quite sure what he means by that. I don't know whether he means the door that sort of goes from the hallway through the mudroom into the garage, that sort of inner door, or the actual garage door. But I mean, I'm not quite sure if I understand what he's saying there. I'm not sure if he's referring to the Vivint sensor that wasn't working. But if he was, then he was being a bit cagey there, because it wasn't working before anyway. But I think what he's trying to do there is open the door kind of symbolically for Shanann to have left, or for someone to have come and gotten her, if that makes sense. In other words, he's leaving a hole in the security layer for Shanann to theoretically slip through. Of course, that explanation doesn't work. It falls flat when you consider the Nathaniel Trinastich's camera, which is trained on the Watts garage, essentially. Chris advised his alarm is through Vivid. It's actually Vivint. Chris said his friend Nikki said the garage door was shut when she got there. So what he's saying there is that the garage door showed that it was open when he left, after he left, and when Nikki arrived, she said it was shut. So it seems like the story he was telling Officer James was that the door opened and closed between when he left and when Nikki got there, if that makes sense. Sometimes in a narrative like this, what is actually said is distorted a little bit. Then he says, I observed a purse on the kitchen counter along with a second phone in a black case. Now, speaking about things getting distorted, it's not clarified here, just in the same way it's not clarified about the phone. It's not clarified, it's not clear how the purse got to the kitchen counter, because the purse wasn't on the kitchen counter to begin with. So in other words, how did the purse get to the kitchen counter? And so we don't have that in a narrative yet. So one wonders, are we going to get it from the Detective Bormover's narrative? We should maybe also look at Officer Bakes' narrative and see if we can solve this mystery of the kitchen counter, of the person on the kitchen counter. Of course, we can also look at what Nicole Atkinson says, and I have actually already done that, but maybe we can get an answer from the officer's narratives. So in terms of that, he talks about there was a green wallet in the purse. Now, that is not the circled area on the cover image of this video. That's not a green wallet. It obviously is a green thing, but that's actually I think it was Shanann's notebook. The green wallet was like a lime green. The notebook was like a darker green color. I observed Shanann's Colorado driver's license to be in the wallet, along with cash and multiple bank credit and debit cards. There was also a nausea medication in the purse prescribed to Shanann, and we now know that nausea medication wasn't all that innocent. And by that I don't mean that there was anything wrong with Shanann having it, just that I think Shanann was struggling with nausea because of what Watts was doing. That Watts was slipping doses of oxycodone into her, probably her shakes, to bring about a miscarriage, maybe also just to, what's the word, to almost like diminish Shanann's alertness, just to kind of bring her down a level, to debilitate her to some extent. And there is a precedent for this. There's a case in the UK where a fiancé over a long period of time drugged his partner with a kind of I think it was an antidepressant actually, which I think it starts with a Z, which made her nauseous but also sleepy. And he sort of made this dose more and more and more. And I think the reason was so that when he ultimately attacked her, it would be quite easy. She would be almost comatose and wouldn't put up a fight. And I'm not saying that Watts necessarily did this in terms of Shanann, but it did have the same result, that it would make her nauseous and not feel well. I think what he underestimated was perhaps her resistance to oxy. That she may have used it quite a lot as a lupus sufferer and had developed a certain amount of what do you call it? Not resistance, but she sort of was fairly used to high doses of it. I'm speculating. I'm just trying to think why it wouldn't necessarily have caused a miscarriage. Either the dose wasn't high enough, or Shanann did have a kind of a resistance to it. The other possibility is that Shanann quickly vomited it out. That she felt ill, quickly vomited it out, and then it couldn't harm the child. Anyway, back to the narrative. Upon searching the rest of the house, I did not find signs of damaged property or anything that would indicate some type of struggle. Now, what I want you guys to bear in mind, I know there are a lot of people who, come hell or high water, will always insist that the crime happened in the bedroom. Now, I can understand an outsider saying, the bedroom makes sense. Chris Watts said it was in the bedroom. Where else would Shanann have gone after she arrived home? And, the bedding was stripped and there is a bed sheet that is moving from A to B, and so on and so on and so on. My counter to that, just based on this particular narrative, is in two areas. The one is, even the officers themselves don't suspect that there was a struggle in the bed. There's no, if there's a life and death struggle where Shanann lost her life, she would have been kicking and struggling and writhing, and yet there's no damage to the sheets. There's no obvious damage to the sheets. Now, you could counter argue that and say, well, because the sheets had been removed and they were in the wash. But I can make the same argument with the shirt that she was wearing. That shirt was removed because it was likely ripped or stretched, or it had something on it that would give away that there was probably some kind of violent tussle that damaged the material. And the same thing would occur on a bed. When people have sex in a very active way, a bed can break. And if you compare that to someone violently trying to stay alive, trying to survive strangulation, two people on a bed at the same time. Obviously, the Watts' bed is very sturdy. I'm just saying, how easy would it not have been to knock things off the nearby bedside tables as you were trying to, get purchase on something? And so there was no signs of anything like that. The other thing is, and this is where you need to apply criminal psychology, is let's say you want to commit a murder, right? What are a couple of things you would rather not do? So one of the things you wouldn't do is commit a murder and leave your identity card where you commit the murder, or leave your wallet where you committed the murder, or leave your cell phone where you committed the murder. Another example is, would you commit a murder inside your own vehicle? I don't really like speaking like this because it makes it sound like, hey, let's go and commit a murder. I'm really just taking us through criminal psychology. I mean, none of us would commit a murder, but in terms of criminal psychology, would a criminal do this, right? So let me give you an example. Would it be better for a criminal, if he wants to get away with his crime, to commit a murder in his own vehicle or to commit it in any other vehicle? And the answer is preferably not in his own vehicle, because if you found any blood of the victim in his vehicle, that would point to him. And there are a couple of examples where you have that. One example is Scott Peterson. I think there were traces of his blood, but only his blood. I think it was in his vehicle, in his truck. Can't quite remember if it was in Lacey's vehicle. I would guess not. But anyways, there were small traces of Scott Peterson's blood, as far as I remember. And I think he got that from cutting chicken wire, which I believe he wrapped Lacey in. There are other examples as well. I think O.J. Simpson bled. I think I'm a little bit fuzzy on the O.J. Simpson case, but I seem to remember there was a little bit of blood in his Bronco. I could be mistaken. And in the Stephen Avery case, there was also, as far as I remember, blood traces and also something like perspiration traces in a vehicle. I'm not sure if it was his vehicle or a vehicle that was just in his scrapyard. But so what I'm trying to get at is, when you have something like blood with just blood of any person, either the perpetrator or the victim, in a vehicle, and the vehicle belongs to you, well, then who else committed the crime except you? Now, instead of a vehicle, imagine something like a bed. If you commit a crime that you mean to get away with, and you commit it in your own bed, who else could have committed the crime except you? Now, you might say, well, no, someone else came into the house, and yeah, but who would do that at 2 o'clock in the morning, or 3 o'clock, or 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock? So anytime a crime is committed there, it's going to only be one person. Now, Chris Watts, you may have forgotten about this, but in his first interview with Coda, his first story was that he thought someone took Shanann. So what he's trying to say there was that, the last time I saw her, she was in bed. She was safely in bed. In other words, go and look at the bed. Go and look at the bedroom. That's the last time I saw her. And that's, of course, I think the last place you should look, because that isn't where the crime happened. But because of the sheets, I think people just fixate on that. And because there's not evidence somewhere else, people can't imagine that it could have happened anywhere else. But it's as simple as, in the Patrick Frazee case, the crime happened in the lounge. And before we knew that it happened in the lounge, there was no indication whatsoever where the crime had happened. In fact, it seemed like no crime had happened. Right? So you can't say, because there's no evidence, no crime happened. So with the Patrick Frazee case, the question that comes up is, there's no evidence that the crime happened. Where did the crime likely happen? And the answer was, well, in Kelsey Barrett's home. Where in her home? That was very hard to say. And it turned out to be in the lounge. And it turned out to be very horrible what happened. Her husband, her fiancé, pulled a shirt, I think, over her and asked her to sort of close her eyes and smell for a candle. And then with her vision obscured, he pulled out a baseball bat and he bludgeoned her, right? But the point is, that was the crime scene, and even though the police came to investigate, they couldn't find any evidence of it. the fact that they couldn't find any evidence of it doesn't mean that it wasn't where it was. And it was only much later when Crystal Kenny, the mistress, came and she said, well, she cleaned up this crime scene over several hours, that they found out when they pulled up the floorboards, they found traces of blood that had seeped between the wood slats. And then they found, okay, so this is where the crime happened. So you should never say, where there's no evidence, it doesn't mean that, the absence of evidence is sometimes evidence, right? And the Chris Watts case is a good example of that, with this house that is clean from top to bottom. When you look closely at the bed sheets and the pillowcases, what you are seeing looks like something that has been picked off the ground, that it has that sort of look of material being squished together. That's how I see it anyway. There are smear traces on the edges of the pillow case and also closer to the middle of it. Okay, so going on, so he says even though they know they've investigated the house, they know that even though the bed looks the way it does, they don't see that as a sign of a struggle. There's no blood on the sheets. There's no smell. There's nothing. Nothing has been ripped. Nothing is broken. Everything is fine, right? The house is very well kept and organized, with the exception of the office area. I observed medication in Ziploc bags on desks in the office. The medication was inhalers and what I recognized to be packages of medicine for nebulizers. There was also a prescription bottle of, I think, 4 Celeste of omeprazole, 10 milligrams in the bag. The Lexus was parked in the garage with 2 car seats in the back seat and the keys sitting on the center console. That's quite interesting. What I really like about Officer James is his attention to detail. So the keys sitting on the center console, it's quite interesting that that is where they were left. Because obviously if the Lexus keys were anywhere related to Chris Watts, like in his pockets, one wonders what would have been going on. Now, one possibility is that Chris Watts put the Lexus keys, perhaps that he had with him, into the Lexus when he returned from the well site. That's something a lot of people thought he retrieved something from the Lexus, but it's possible that he actually put the keys inside the Lexus. Because it would look a bit strange if Watts was walking around with Shanann's car keys, which, bear in mind, he was doing anyway during the month of July. But it would look quite strange if, when Shanann was back, that he was kind of running around with the car keys to the Lexus when Shanann should have had access to them. He also says there was a remote to the garage attached to the passenger side visor. I did not observe anything out of the ordinary inside the Lexus. There was mail sitting on the passenger seat. There was also other car seats sitting on the floor of the garage. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that. I guess he talks about there were 2 car seats in the back seat. I guess the other car seats were perhaps older car seats of the children. I don't know. But it seems like Nicholas Atkinson knew that the car seats that Shanann would normally use were in the Lexus. The basement was unfinished and very well organized. There was a bed in the basement that had pillows and a blanket on it. The bed was not made. So it's quite interesting, this parallel about, the basement bed not being made and the main bedroom bed not being made. It's quite interesting, that parallel. If you think about it in another way, if Shanann was in the house, all the beds would have been made. But Chris Watts, would he have made his own bed? Probably not. So in other words, Shanann's attitude to neatness, I think, was greater than Chris Watts' own attitude. And I think that was the cause of a lot of resentment and strife, because Chris Watts did quite a lot of the chores, and it was, I think, quite excessive. It's something he said to Coda as well, just that, when he said, Coda said, well, why are you not happy? Why did the spark die? Well, his answer was, because he does everything. He does the laundry, and then he sort of cut himself off. I don't think that's the full answer. I mean, the full answer is the spark died because he had an affair. But I think it is part of the answer was stuff like that, that he wasn't necessarily happy with. And I think this bed not being made in the basement, if Shanann was alive, if Shanann had lived on that Monday, do you think the main bedroom bed would have been made? I do. Do you think that the children's beds would have been made? I do. And so, yeah, you have a kind of a mismatch that Watts wouldn't necessarily have felt the need to make his bed just because it wasn't a priority to him. There was also a makeshift window covering on the window near the bed. I then went upstairs to the master bedroom on the second level where Sergeant Bakes and Officer Coonrod were. So he goes from the basement bed to the upstairs main bedroom. Upon entering the room, Sergeant Bakes was looking at a blanket on the floor. I did not observe anything obviously damaged or anything that would indicate a struggle in the bedroom. So there they are, looking at the bedroom, looking at the blankets, and despite looking at that, they don't see any damage to the bedding. And as I say, it's either because nothing happened on the bed. It's also possible, as I say, that some of the essential items that should have been on the bed were in the washing machine, but one would think that, did they not look into the washing machine? It's also possible Chris Watts hid that bedding away. Where is anybody's guess? He could have possibly quickly put it in a suitcase somewhere. I think there was still a pink suitcase in the upstairs bedroom at the time, so he could have quickly put it in a suitcase somewhere where officers even looking around wouldn't necessarily look. Another possibility is a container in the basement. I'm trying to think of other possibilities upstairs. There was quite a lot of clutter, so there were a lot of shirts and items hanging around and all over the place. So there were a couple of possibilities, I guess. But the point is, he says, I did not observe anything obviously damaged or anything that would indicate a struggle in the bedroom. And I want to highlight that. For all those people who think that Chris Watts murdered Shanann in bed, that's not what law enforcement think, and I agree with them. So Yared says the washing machine door was open and it appeared there were a couple of child clothing items in the washer. There was a load of clothes in the dryer. So there was child's clothing in the washer. So they did look in the washing machine, and there was a load of clothes in the dryer. Was there anything behind that? Like, was there child's clothing, and then behind the child's clothing, what was there? Bed sheets or something like that? We just don't know. The purple kid's bedroom did not have the bed made, but the sheets and blankets were on it. There was a Jack and Jill bathroom pink between two kid bedrooms. There was not water in the toilet of the bathroom. A lot of people have remarked about that. And that brings me to another thing that I highlighted in the title image, where you see Officer James handing his card to Chris Watts, and then you see a reflection of them at the end of the hallway in a mirror of the same thing. And I believe that mirror is the downstairs bathroom, and that is also a possible area for washing and changing, and so you don't necessarily need to use the basement. That is a area very close to the garage, that bathroom, where Chris Watts could have washed himself, could have changed his clothes. Something could have been put in there as well, like sheets, soiled sheets, into a bathroom cupboard. It's just very difficult to imagine where these sheets were if Watts didn't, if he didn't put them in the trash. He said in his second confession in February, he said that he put the sheets in the trash on Tuesday morning. But I wonder if that's true. It's possible that he did, but I wonder if he didn't put it in there earlier. Because where else would he have put it? I was advised the bathroom had previously been locked. There was a second bathroom off the loft upstairs that had children bath items in the tub. There was also a well-organized playroom upstairs with toys and books. The children bath items in the tub suggest that the children may have bathed or been bathed Sunday night. I don't know if they were. It's possible, I guess, that they were, or that's just sort of what was left over from Saturday. So it's hard to say. The backyard had a short privacy fence with townhomes directly to the south. Upon looking in the backyard, I went back outside to the front where Chris was. I observed there to be a latch at the top of the front door, something commonly used in hotel rooms, that would prevent the door from opening unless the latch was unlatched. So another good observation from him about this latch. And I think Nicole Atkinson said that door was usually not latched. I also observed a pair of black, what appeared to be female flip-flops directly next to the front door. So these were what Shanann wore when she arrived home from the airport. I think they were actually brown, but I could be wrong. Chris advised the garage door pad of the exterior garage did not work. Chris advised you had to have the actual garage door opener to close the garage from the outside. Shanann's garage door opener, I think, was in her car. Officer Coonrod pressed the garage door opener that is attached to the wall next to the door that leads into the house to see how long it would take for the garage door to close. So that's inside the garage. There was enough time for someone to press the button from inside the garage, then run out of the garage onto the driveway. Chris advised all their families in North Carolina. He advised he has friends in Frederick, Erie, Aurora, Parker, and he has tried to contact them. Chris advised he couldn't log in to check the bank accounts because she does the finances. That's also quite a significant revelation there, that Shanann does the finances and he can't log into the bank accounts. I don't think that's true. I think he could log in, but he didn't want to let slip that he knew the state of their finances, and thus that's a motive for the murder. He said he knows the password but not the username. That to me is a ridiculous statement. You usually know the username but not the password. Passwords change, usernames typically don't. Anyway, I just think that's a ridiculous statement. He advised they bank through USAA and Chase. Chris agreed to call to see if there was any activity. Chris advised the small black suitcase next to the staircase was from the trip Shanann just got back from on the morning of the 13th of August. She had gone to Arizona for work. Chris advised the suitcase observed in their bedroom was from when they were in North Carolina. He said they just got back from North Carolina, then she went to Arizona 2 days later. Chris advised if there was a stockpile of cash in the house, he would have not known about it. He said she normally only carries about $100 cash with her. The bed of Chris's work truck was filled with items, including a fire extinguisher, a large diameter hose, a shovel, a gas can, and multiple toolboxes. Chris advised that was a pickup he always drives. Chris said he needed to go inside for his card information for the bank. Inside the house, he said there was a taxi cab charge that posted to Chase on the 12th. Chris advised Shanann had a passport, but he didn't know where it was. Now, I presume that taxi cab charge had something to do with Shanann catching a taxi to the airport in Phoenix. I think it's got something to do with that. I asked, or possibly a taxi from the hotel to the airport, something like that, or from the airport to the hotel. I asked Chris if he had looked through a wallet to make sure all her cards were there. He said she has different cards than him and didn't know how many she had. That's also a really interesting comment from him, that he doesn't know how many cards his wife has. Now, either that's true and he's sort of, Shanann has so many cards and the spending is so out of control that he just doesn't actually know how many she has, or he doesn't want to let on that he's aware of how many cards she has. So like if it said she's got 14 cards, but Chris Watts is very good with numbers, and it seems unlikely that he wouldn't know that, but who knows. He said the debit cards were on the same account. Chris advised his kids didn't have a favorite pair of shoes they wear. That's quite an interesting comment he made, because to Agent Coda, he spoke about, especially in recent days, Cece finding a pair of like winter boots, and that was in the last photo, not the last photo, but a photo taken of the two children that was printed out and put on the table in front of Chris Watts while he was being questioned on the Tuesday night by FBI agent Graham Coda. And then he remarked about those booties, kind of like cowboy boots. They were actually winter shoes, and that she was wearing them constantly. So for him to say the kids didn't have a favorite pair of shoes, well, that's contradicted by what he told Coda. Chris showed a closet with multiple children's shoes in it. He said he tells them to pick their shoes. Chris advised Cece takes Singulair for allergies and omeprazole for acid reflux. He said he thinks they ran out of inhalers because the last one he saw had 0 on it and they hadn't refilled it yet. Chris advised he went back to work on the 8th, so they got home from North Carolina on the 7th. Chris advised she left for Arizona on Friday and got home last night. Well, it's actually early that same morning. He advised he had the kids all weekend and they went to a birthday party yesterday, which was Sunday. Chris said he slept in the basement a few times because of the separation. He said it was probably Thursday night into Friday. I'm not sure if that's true. I'm not sure if he slept in the basement a few times. I think he slept in the basement definitely Thursday night, and I don't think he slept at all on Sunday night. But I think he was in the basement quite a lot Sunday night, but I don't think he slept necessarily in the basement. I don't think he slept a few times in the basement because of the separation. He slept at Nicole Kessinger many, many times because they were physically separated when Shanann went to North Carolina. So I don't think that is true. He advised the kids sleep in their own beds. Sergeant Bakes asked about the sheets in the master bedroom. Chris advised she usually jumps into bed after being in the airport and will wash the sheets the next day to get the airport off them. Now, him saying that suggests to me that the sheets were washed and that they were somewhere between, say, a washing machine and the next part. So it could be a dryer, it could be hanging somewhere or somewhere. But it is interesting that Sergeant Bakes asked him about the sheets. And Chris then talks about Shanann jumping straight into bed, which I don't think she would do. You know, she wanted to keep her house so tidy. Why wouldn't she have the same strict attitude to cleanliness about herself? Doesn't that make sense? Chris advised he was in the master bedroom last night. Chris advised Shanann works at home in direct sales. Chris advised she doesn't go for walks around the area, but he will go for runs. Chris advised this morning they had a conversation about selling the house and separating. He advised they were both pretty emotional and crying. Now we're on Discovery page 58. Sorry, my voice is really going at this point. Chris said Shanann told him she was taking the kids to a friend's house but didn't tell him who. He said she was still in bed when that happened. Chris said it was between 4 and 5 a.m. Now in Chris's various versions, he starts off saying it was 5 a.m. I think he said that to Coonrod. To James, he said between 4 and 5 a.m. And to Coda, he said 4 a.m. He said he woke up at 4 a.m. Chris said he was passed out when she got home, then woke her up. He said he wanted to have the conversation with her face to face. So interestingly here, he doesn't say where he slept. So he said he slept many times in the basement. According to him, he slept many times in the basement. He doesn't say here where he slept on the night that Shanann arrived back. It doesn't say that here. And unfortunately, they don't seem to ask him. He said he wanted to have the conversation with her face to face. I don't think that's true. I think she wanted to have a conversation with him face to face. I think he really didn't want to. He was terrified of a face to face conversation. And I think he was especially terrified of a conversation where he would actually tell her what is really going on. The full, cold, hard truth. That he was cheating on her, that he didn't want the child, and he wanted to get divorced. He said the conversation lasted 30 to 45 minutes. He said he left between 5:15 and 5:30 hours. That's not true. He left between 5:18, which is when he backed up his truck, and I think 5:46, but I could be wrong. I know he was sort of busy loading for about 27 minutes. Chris said he went to the location first east of Hudson, which should actually be Roggan. He said he was the only one there because of one of the operators had an issue there Friday that was left over the weekend. That's also not strictly true. It wasn't an operator having an issue, it was him having an issue. He wanted to go to that particular well site. And we know about that from text that he sent on the Friday. He spoke to a colleague on the Friday. He sent the texts on the Sunday evening to make sure that he had access to the well site. He said he went there to verify the issue to see if he could fix it. That was his cover for going there to actually get rid of the bodies. He said he then went, I think there's a typo there. He said he then went to a pumping unit across the ranch. He advised it was the Survey Ranch near Roggan, Colorado. So he doesn't immediately say where it is. He first talks about Hudson, but then he is more specific later on. At this point, they don't even know that it's Survey 319, okay? Chris said he loaded up his water bottles, computer, book bag, container with O-rings into his truck. It's interesting that he loads up water bottles, isn't it? Couldn't that have been evidence that he also needed to get rid of? Water bottles, plural. You know, some of those shake bottles, plural. He advised he had an issue where someone stole tools out of his truck previously. He said he parked his truck near the neighbor's house for a few days to see if someone was trying to break into it again. He said he had his toolboxes in the back unlocked. He said he unloads his stuff on the weekends to clear his truck out. He said they originally moved in with a friend in Broomfield. Then their house was built in 2013. He said they don't have many friends in Frederick besides Nikki, and some friends had recently moved to Thornton, Nick and Amanda Thayer. Chris said Shanann's friend Cassie is a nurse and noticed she had low blood sugar while they were in Arizona. He said, sorry, that's my dog. The birds are actually singing. It's 03:43 in the morning here. So it's really a late night. He said they don't have many friends in Frederick besides Nikki and some friends that recently moved to Thornton, Nick and Amanda Thayer. So because they only have these three people that they know, I think that's also why Chris Watts thought he could get away with it, because they had no family around them and they had some friends that didn't really know them that well, or so he thought. Chris said Shanann's friend Cassie is a nurse and noticed she had low blood sugar. He said before he met Shanann, she had a bad car accident where they believed she blacked out or had a seizure. I left Chris with my business card, and that's the picture you see him handing the card, and told him to have her call us if anyone they know is in contact with her. Throughout the interaction with Chris, he was very cooperative and answered questions appropriately. So that is quite interesting, is that to Officer James, it seems, was kind of fooled by Chris Watts, that he thought that Chris Watts seemed appropriate. But bear in mind, he arrived at the scene quite late in the day. So I think he missed some of the details. So it's interesting, he investigated the scene in a very detailed way, but didn't notice that much wrong with Watts himself, right? So he says nothing was readily observed. Come on. Inside the residence that would indicate a struggle. So to James, I think he's sort of going, well, it's probably no big deal. In other words, he's buying Chris Watts' story. On the 13th of August at approximately 21:12, I called Chris to see if he had heard anything. He advised he had not, but provided me with a phone number to a few of her friends. And we will do this in a part 2. I don't think that call was particularly useful, but there's another call from Officer Goodman that we're going to talk about in the next episode. I need to wrap up. As I said, the birds are singing and my dog is wanting to go and sleep, and so do I. Thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do. And I'll see you guys next time.